So yes, I'm the co-founder of Token Man, and we're all about getting men into the gender diversity discussion. And I'm going to tell you why we founded Token Man and why I'm here and why I've been doing this for 2 years. So yeah, let's skip that. So this is Creative Social. So Creative Social is again for 11 years. It was my passion project. We organised events for creative directors around the world every 6 months. We're very lucky. I've been to Shanghai, Tokyo, Barcelona, Stockholm. We've been to 21 different cities. And in 2008, we went to Florence. If anyone works in digital advertising, you probably would have heard of Unit 9. Piero Frescobaldi is the owner of Unit 9, and this is his parents' villa in Florence. They are wine importers. They have some fantastic wine. And Pablo Marquez, who's an ECD, again in the industry, he had his camera and we said, let's take a photo. And we took this photo. And we were so proud of it. You know, what a beautiful photo. And we used it a lot. It was kind of the photo for Creative Social. What's wrong with that photo?
There's one woman.
There's one woman. What else? They're all white apart from Danush. Is the only BAME person within that photo, and for you know, for a long time, and that kind of that does summarise our industry to a certain extent. There's something called a 3% conference in the advertising industry, and it did reflect the fact that about 5 years ago, only 3% of creative directors in the US were female. 3%. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now in the UK, it's 14%. Still not great, but hey, it's better than 3%, and it is moving, and there's quite a lot of us doing work. And why that's important, I mean, it's fundamental. So 2 reasons. One, I'm sure for anyone that's been in this space will know this study. This is McKinsey. McKinsey did a study where they took, I think it was 1,000 of the top companies in the US, and then put them in quartiles based on the mix of both gender and of ethnicity on their boards. And what they, very simple, they took the top quarter, so the best mix, compared it to the bottom quarter, the least mix. And they found if it was the more gender diverse performed 15% better. Those who are ethnically diverse actually performed 35% better. If you're interested in this subject, please look at something called the Great British Diversity Experiment, which I was part of, where we looked at really why diversity leads to better ideas. So diversity is not just fundamental for business, it's fundamental for creativity. And for a long time, because this was my hobby, and I ran an agency, I was the CEO of an agency, the reality is the reason it looked like this is because that's just, you know, they're the people we hang out with, they're the people that came, they were the people, you know, so for us it was like when people said, you know, you need to sort this out, we're like, we don't have time to sort this out. You know, the fact is people find us who want to find us, and it's not our problem. But you can only say that for so long, and you start to realise actually it was our problem. And so what we started to do is about 5 years ago, I worked with Laura Jordan-Bamback, who runs She Says, which is a group that supports women within advertising, a brilliant group. And I said, can we organise a dinner? And so we organised a dinner. At the time, I was in an agency. I just turned up and I didn't think anything of it. I was just going to a dinner that we'd organised to try and recruit more women. And I turned up and there were 12 women. It was my least favourite dinner I've had probably in my life. And the reason for that, not the company was delightful, because the first time in my life I realised what it felt like to be a minority. Yeah, and it was horrible. You know, I lost my voice. Laura, who's one of my best friends, she didn't even know she did it, but she was so conscious that I was a man with loads of women, she cut me off while I was talking. I've even spoken to some of those women 2 years down the line. They said, we didn't even realise it was your dinner. Yeah, because she was just so conscious that all of a sudden conversations were happening around me that I had no affinity to. I just didn't enjoy it. It was really unenjoyable. And towards the end of the dinner, gender diversity did come up as a topic. I said one thing, and then I realised I'm not going to be able to speak for the rest of the time because I got absolutely killed on the one thing I said. But, you know, I came back and I just had this idea and I just said, listen, you know, could you imagine if we got CEOs to experience what I experienced during the dinner? They would learn more about the challenges women face in the workplace than anything anyone has ever told them. Because for me, it was really eye-opening. It made me realise that when I walked into a management meeting that had 8 men in it and 2 women in it, when I naturally did, because us men aren't that intelligent, the reason we talk about football is we've got nothing else to talk about. The minute I started talking about football with Pete, I cut out those women, which was really bad because all of a sudden, it's hard enough as it is being in the minority. So I talked about it, but I didn't do anything about it until I do a lot of work with Hyper Island. Hyper Island's the leading digital school in the world, based in Stockholm. And I had the honour of, they were doing a breakfast series and they asked me to come over and talk about creative social. And it was probably a room like this. It was very intimate. I did my talk and then it came to questions. And I was just a bit, it felt nice breakfast, calm. And then someone at the back aggressively asked me, what are you doing about the fact you have no women? I just got defensive, really defensive. And all the good stuff that I was talking about kind of went out the window. I didn't talk about that stuff because I felt like I was being attacked. And through being attacked, I just didn't answer the question as well as I could have answered that question. And it wasn't like I said anything really bad because the people queuing up to speak to me afterwards were women, including one woman that wanted to start Creative Social in Sweden. But this particular woman clearly didn't like my answer. So she then complained to the CEO. I didn't then get work for that organisation for 18 months. Okay, and this was someone that had been doing some really good stuff in the background, and I got persecuted for it. And the truth is I got angry. I got really angry. And I didn't, by the way, that bit I got angry full stop for being attacked. The bit about the 18 months and I didn't find that until 18 months later. Yeah, so the reality is I just got angry with the fact that I was doing this stuff and I just didn't answer the question very well. And I was disappointed in myself. Why didn't I answer that question well enough? Why didn't I talk about it? Because I really believe in this stuff. So I went back to work. I was working at Shell at the time as head of innovation. And I started talking to this lovely lady, Emma Perkins, who is now ECD at Mullen Lowe. And we started talking about this experience. I started talking about Token Man and the dinner experience. And we just started talking about the issues that exist in the workplace around gender diversity. And guess what? I said some silly things because I don't know all the facts. I haven't spent all my time thinking about it. But she was fantastic because when I said something stupid, she didn't judge. All she did was ask me questions. So I'll give you the one that sticks out is she said to me, we were talking about the gender pay gap, and I said, but people sometimes forget in the discussion that women make the choice to take 9 months maternity. And she just said, you're assuming that's a choice. And that was such a brilliant question. And it wasn't even a question, it just was a statement. And my mind straight away went in 2 different directions because that's how I think. And I still don't know which direction she was talking about, but it didn't really matter. Because what she did is she made me think. And through thinking, I could then start to work out what the challenges were. And it was at that point that Emma said, let's do something about it. We love this idea of Token Man. So we founded Token Man. So Token Man is an initiative to give men a better understanding of the challenge women face when in the minority. We are going beyond that, but that's really what our focus is, but fundamentally to create behaviour change. So far, we've interviewed 15 CEOs. I think we're about to hit our 20th. So we simply get senior female execs to interview male execs around gender diversity. And we have tried to interview and find people that are already doing really positive things. So what it really is trying to do is trying to highlight the actions that people are already making to change people's environment. And we are challenging. We know some of those CEOs get very challenging questions and they're all very open about them. And I think the interesting thing is that we're also that they know that they can still do more and they can still do better, and we're pushing it more and more. So this is Niels Leonard. So he said the best work happens when very different minds and disciplines come together. Creative collisions are how many new things happen. The ferocious need for diverse and varied thinking demands we have the same diversity in the makeup of our companies. I mean, I find it amazing when we talk about a world that's moving so quickly that advertising has got away with it for so long. Yeah, 70% of women are disenfranchised from advertising, yet women have the biggest purchasing power in the UK. Yeah, anyone else would get, as an industry, the advertising industry should get sacked. Yeah, it just hasn't kept up, and one of the biggest challenges it has is it just is not representative. The creative teams that come up with ideas are just not representative of the people they're talking to. Yeah, and they're not diverse, so they're not the most effective they can be. Yeah, and so again, that's one of the big findings we found in the Great British Diversity Experiment. So, this is Michael, CMO of The Economist. The cost of excluding women and them not succeeding in their careers is huge. If you add up women, LGBT people, people of different ethnic origins or different religions who can feel excluded from the workplace, it's a huge pool of talent you're missing out on. So yes, people say to me, why are you focusing on gender? Shouldn't we be looking at every single diversity? And the answer to that is 100% yes. I think the big difference is when we talk about short change, making changes immediately, because the women are in the workplace already, if you make those changes, you're going to see an immediate uplift. If we start looking at things like BAME, if we start looking at things like disability, there's actually just it's a longer process to do. So I think at the moment, what the sad thing is we have women in the workplace who are just being prejudiced against every day. And let me be really clear, it's not just women, it's also this idea that every man should conform to a certain stereotype is also an issue. So getting a more diverse workplace and getting a better mix is actually going to help both men and women. So what are the key issues? The three of these, it didn't take me long. As I said, I've been doing this for 2 years, and I would say within a month of really getting underneath, the key issues are very clear. I think most people know those key issues, which is unconscious bias. I'm writing a piece now that will go in the Drum in the next month, all around unconscious bias. The sad thing is we all have unconscious biases against everything, but on the, so there's a test, you can all do the test. It's called the Harvard IAT test, and it's the gender career test. And what you'll find is, if I'm guessing, if men and women, most of you will have a gender career bias to men. Yeah, so even the women in this room, I hate to say it, you will have that bias. So you will see men being closer to career and women being closer to family, and that has huge implications in terms of day-to-day decisions. The second one is parental leave. Jo Swinson, she was the minister that brought in shared parental leave. Last year in the advertising industry, 2% of people that could take up shared parental leave took up shared parental leave. Absolutely tiny. And partly that is the gender pay gap. These things are all, the next thing, the gender pay ties into it, because as long as I think it's 85%, still 80% of couples in the UK, the man is the breadwinner. And when childcare costs are so bloody high in the UK, I think it's the second in Europe, it makes sense that the breadwinner is the one that needs to stay into work. But there are other massive issues, when it comes down to parental leave. There are things like the societal issue, in terms of men actually being seen, it's not being seen as a good thing of people taking parental leave. And there are some people driving that. Our latest interview, which is Paul Frampton, will come out in the next couple of weeks, and he's just had his fourth child. And he's doing a lot of work in terms of parental leave. But we're trying to push for every business to give 6 weeks paid, fully paid paternity leave. To really start closing the gap. Because the only people that are going to close the gap at the moment are corporates. Unless the tax system's going to change significantly, we're not going to get childcare to the levels you get in somewhere like Sweden. And the one that really have changed in the last month, 2 months, is men's resistance to change. I think there's two issues. One, most men like me, I was the problem. That's the reason why I'm doing this. I was the problem from the extent that I am one of those people that said, well, I hired the best person for the job. No, I didn't. I hired people that looked like me. Because do you know what? I thought I was so great, so I thought I'd get someone else like me, and that tended to be men. I mean, that's what unconscious bias is. So I think the first thing is the gap. I think as soon as people realise the gap, people just don't like to change. As human beings, we don't like change. So it's a massive issue to try and get men to change. I suppose the fifth one I would add is budgets as well, especially in our industry. We're seeing a lot of people talk about wanting to change, diversity being top of their agenda. And as soon as they say top of the agenda, you ask the best question ever, which is, so how much budget have you put aside for it? If it's top of your agenda, you must have put a budget. Just go quiet. What do you mean budget? So this costs to do? And I don't think it's a cost. I think it's an investment. And I think the agencies that get it right and the businesses that get it right are the ones that are going to be super successful. But I think this was the moment where I worked it out. It took me a while. It took me about a year. I had the honour of judging for the IPA Women of Tomorrow Awards. This is Hannah. And at the end of the interview, I asked her, what do you really want? And she said, I want a world where little girls don't have to think about gender in the same way my brother has never had to think about gender. And that's the one thing that I think no one really, and this is both sides, we as men have never had to think about gender. So we don't think about gender. Yeah, it really is as simple. So sometimes when we say stuff, it's because we're just not thinking about it. Yeah, and I think so from both ways, what we have to do and what we're trying to do in getting men into the discussion, it is forcing us to think about the issue. And it's allowing us to understand the issue so that we can make change. And yeah, I've already talked about this. So again, I just want to talk about that, the men making change. So the reason it's fundamentally important that men are in this discussion, I can't remember her name, but she runs the gender blog. It will come back to me. But she said in a panel actually in here, she made a really good point, which is that no minority in history has ever affected change without the majority support. Okay, and people say to me, but women aren't in the minority. Let's be very clear. At a senior level in a lot of industries, including politics, women are in the minority. Yeah, so in order to affect change, men need to be there helping making that change happen. Yeah, and so that's why it's really fundamental that men get into the discussion. So what have we achieved? Education through the interviews, inspiration through the interviews, seeing other men and seeing what they have been doing. I know one CEO, nearly every CEO I've spoken to has done so many interviews in their career, and most of them say this is the interview they've got the most people saying, well done, phoning them up, talking to them. I know someone in the network that's had fellow CEOs phoning them up saying, can we talk about this? So it's really started to affect change. And we worked out that so far the interviews have been read by 25,000 times, which isn't bad. I mean, it's still a long way to go. But also real change. So CEOs that have been interviewed who have then gone, I know one CEO and said, we asked the gender pay gap, and he said, listen, we do review it. I'm going to go and have a look at it myself. Within 2 weeks, two women got pay increases because he just saw a gap. I know 2 women have been, as a result of an interview, a CEO promoted 2 women to the board immediately. Yeah, so it's had real significant change and real change just by getting those CEOs. And they haven't done it because they've done it because they've thought about it and they go, actually, let me think about this. I need to make this change. So what are we doing now? I'm doing a lot of work. There are some cards out there if anyone's interested, but we're doing a lot of work in terms of hacking gender diversity. So Ludi said at the beginning, I'm a hacker. What that means is I don't hack into computers. What it means is, the reason I did, everyone says to me, why did you do Take a Man? Are you a feminist? Is it because you had children? Do you know what? It's actually none of those. I just saw a problem and I just felt that there was another way of tackling it. It was as simple as that, and there was a problem that needed to get fixed. And so this idea of starting to, rather than waiting for HR departments or even CEOs to take control of the problem, I think we as individuals need to take control of the problem because we can make significant differences. So if you make every single person in your organisation a hacker, so they start thinking about the problem, they understand the problem, and they say, what change can I make in my behaviour to make a difference so that if every single person in your organisation does that, it will have a significant difference on the business. So the example I talk about a lot is Sir David Brailsford. And so for those that know Sir David Brailsford, he did Team Sky, and what he talks about is marginal gains. And so what he did when he looked at turning Team GB into one of the most successful ever teams in history, is he looked at every single thing that impacted an athlete's performance, and said, I'm going to improve every single one of those things by 2%. Yeah, and he then delivered 7 out of the 12 gold medals at London 2012. I'm currently planning on hopefully writing a book. It will be, the working title is Us, and really, does the world need another book on diversity? You tell me if you think it's interesting. But I think what's interesting for me is the feedback I've had so far from men and women alike is because I'm a man and because I was part of the problem, I tend to look at it from different angles. When we talk about diversity, so I say things that people haven't heard before simply because I'm talking it from a different perspective. And I think that's important, that we have all the perspectives. I think just to summarise and close off, this is Alison. She said, I thought this was great. She said, men who serve as champions or advocates are powerful agents for change in the workplace. As the dominant group, they are in a prime position to influence cultural and organisational change. Ultimately, we believe if we're going to make change, it needs to be together. And in order to do that, we need to get men and women together to solve the issue. Thank you.